Okay, so I think it's good we start with Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, maliki yawm al-Din, إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم الضالين صدق الله العلي العظيم. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعن الله ولا أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين آمين يا رب العالمين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. So this is part 37 of our ongoing series of discussions on the book attributed to Imam al-Sadiq titled Misbah ash-Sharia, or the Lantern of the Path. With this session, we introduce a new vibrant thread, and as we begin to weave it into our study, we find ourselves guided by the echoes of our past discussions. The foundational principle of our study remains unchanged. Each session builds upon the last, weaving together a larger, interconnected tapestry. Over the past 4 gatherings, we trace the profound trials and strategic triumphs of Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, peace and blessings be upon him, witnessing how divine leadership transforms traps into pulpits and persecution into victory. That history is not merely a prelude. It is the very context in which our next session, our next reflection must be understood. For the light of the Imam is a sun, and that sun casts its rays upon the most noble of moons. Today we turn our hearts towards one such light, the sister of Imam al-Ridha, the noble lady of Qom, Sayyedah Fatimah al-Ma'suma, peace and blessings be upon her. Her story is not separate from her brother's. It is a powerful and poignant echo of it. It is a story of longing, of a journey undertaken out of unwavering loyalty to the Imam of the time. It is a story of a scholar whose knowledge reflected the divine wisdom of her house, and of a saint whose purity became a sanctuary for generations of believers. Just as we dedicated several sessions to unpacking the depth of Imam al-Ridha's mission, so too will we give this luminous story the space it deserves. Over the next 2 sessions, we will explore her life, her legacy, and her inseparable bond with the Imamah, understanding why her shrine in Qom became one of the greatest centers of Shia knowledge and spirituality. Her life is a testament that Wilayah is not only a station to be defended, but a magnetic pole around which the purest hearts revolve. With the epic of the Imam of Khurasan fresh in our minds, let us now turn to the story of the Lady of Qom. In his most beautiful name and with full trust in his support, imploring his assistance and guidance, we proceed. Please give me a salawat and we'll have a brief recap of the 4 sessions of Imam Ridha.
الله
اللهم صل على
اللهم صل
محمد
على محمد
وآل
وآل محمد
محمد.
So over the past 4 sessions, we have traced the extraordinary life and mission of the 8th Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, peace and blessings be upon him. We move from the era of his noble father, Imam Musa al-Kadhim, an era defined by the overt violence of dungeons and chains, into the unique trial faced by Imam al-Ridha. Not the brutality of the sword, but the subtle political poison of a throne. This 4-part journey revealed a masterclass in divine leadership, showing how the Imam navigated and ultimately defeated one of the most sophisticated plots ever conceived to extinguish the light of the Ahlul Bayt. Our exploration began with the Abbasid Khalif Ma'mun, who, having learnt that martyrdom only strengthens Shi'ism, devised a new strategy. Instead of persecuting the Imam, he sought to co-opt him by appointing him as his heir apparent. This was a gilded cage, designed to achieve several goals: to neutralize the revolutionary spirit of the Imamah, to legitimize the corrupt Abbasid regime, to control the Imam directly, and to sever him from his followers. Imam al-Ridha, peace and blessings be upon him, immediately exposed this trap. He framed his forced journey from Medina not as an honor, but as a march towards martyrdom. Upon his arrival in Marv, he initially refused the succession. Only under the direct threat of death did he accept, and even then, he imposed debilitating conditions. He would not appoint, dismiss, judge, or involve himself in any affair of the state. He accepted an empty title, but refused all authority, turning Ma'mun's intended victory into a public humiliation for the so-called caliphate. Ma'mun's strategy of containment backfired spectacularly. The Imam transformed his forced journey into a traveling pulpit, using every stop to engage with the people and clarify the truths of Imamah. This reached its zenith in Naishapur, with the narration of the famous hadith of the golden chain. After declaring that belief in God's oneness, that is, La ilaha illallah, there is no God except the God, is a fortress of salvation, the Imam added the momentous condition with its conditions, and I am one of its conditions. With these words, he publicly and inseparably linked Tawheed, or monotheism, with Wilayah, divinely mandated guardianship, cementing the core of the Shia system for all time. In Ma'mun's court, through masterful debates and the patronage of poets, the Imam further amplified this message, turning a plan for his containment into the loudest public proclamation of Shiism in decades. Ma'mun's grand scheme ultimately collapsed under the weight of the Imam's steadfastness. By refusing to participate in or legitimize the state, the Imam shattered the illusion of partnership. His mere presence acted as an unflattering mirror, exposing the deep corruption and hypocrisy of the Abbasid court, and causing Ma'mun's pious facade to completely crumble. Having failed at co-option and containment, a defeated Ma'mun resorted to the crude weapon of his predecessors, poison. The Imam's martyrdom was not a defeat, but rather Ma'mun's final, desperate admission that his entire political project had failed. This act immortalized the Imam, and his radiant shrine in Mashhad today stands as an eternal testament to the truth that thrones of tyrants rot, while the light of the oppressed endures. Finally, we reflected on the enduring legacy of the Imam's stance. His life affirmed the essential truth that Imamah is not a political office to be granted by kings, but rather it is a divine covenant established by God's command or nas. It is a sacred trust, not a worldly prize. From his principled stand, we derived critical jurisprudential lessons on the absolute prohibition of voluntary cooperation with oppressive systems and the crucial balance between strategic concealment or taqiyya and public clarification or tabyin. His trial also taught us a painful internal lesson: the danger of fitna or sedition, from followers who, lacking insight or basira, mistake their own limited judgment for piety and fracture the community from within. The Imam's life is a timeless call for unity, humility, and unwavering loyalty to the rightful, divinely appointed leadership. This legacy of divine authority, strategic clarity, and profound sacrifice is the very world into which his noble sister, Sayyedah Fatimah al-Ma'suma, peace and blessings be upon her, was born, and from which her own story of light and loyalty unfolds. If I can get a salawat, we can proceed on to the story of Sayyedah Fatimah al-Ma'suma, the journey that founded a city.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
اللهم
محمد.
صل على محمد وآل محمد.
So to understand the station of Sayyedah Fatimah al-Ma'suma, one must first situate her within the context of her origin. Her identity is inseparable from the house of her father, Imam Musa al-Kadhim, a house that served as a fortress of divine knowledge in an era defined by the darkness of the Abbasid prisons. Sayyedah Fatimah al-Ma'suma was born into the very epicenter of the Imam. She was the daughter, as I said, of the seventh Imam, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim, and the sister of the eighth Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha. Her upbringing was not merely in the presence of Imams, but in the living embodiment of the Imamate itself. This was a household where persecution from the state was met with patience or sabr from the Imam, and where attempts to extinguish the light of guidance only intensified its radiance from within the home. She was therefore nurtured by the twin realities of divine proximity and worldly trial. This inheritance is a cornerstone of Shia theology. The leadership of the Ahlul Bayt is not a matter of political accident or tribal succession. It is a divinely ordained continuation of prophetic guidance. The Quran identifies the essential qualities of these chosen leaders. In Quran, in Surah Anbiya, the chapter of the prophets, 21st chapter of the Quran, verse number 73, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And we made them leaders, imams, guiding by our command. And we inspired to them the doing of good deeds, the establishment of prayer, and the giving of zakat or charity. And they were worshippers of us." The key to understanding the divine station of the Imam lies in the phrase, guiding by our command. In his monumental exegesis or Tafsir al-Mizan, Allama Tabatabai, may God rest his pure soul, provides a profound analysis of this term. He explains that the command, the word command mentioned here, is not the legislative command, something called al-Amr al-Tashri'i. That is, the laws of the Sharia revealed to the prophets. That form of guidance, which involves showing the path, is the duty of every prophet. The guidance of the Imam described in this verse is of a higher, a much more exclusive nature. It refers to God's creative and existential command, or al-Amr al-Takwini, the very power that brings reality into being. Allama Tabatabai writes, he says, and again, the references and citations are all in the write-up. I invite everyone to review them. Allama says, "Therefore, what is meant by the command is the command of guidance by which God guides whoever he wills from amongst his servants. This is different from the path to which the call of da'wah guides. For that is the affair of the prophets, the messengers, and the believers below them. This higher command is what accompanies the Imam and by which he guides, and it is a command of the spiritual dominion, Amr Malakuti, which accompanies things, bringing them into existence and directing them." The implication of this is profound. The Imam does not merely point out the correct path through his connection to this Amr Malakuti. He possesses a form of spiritual guardianship, Wilayah Takwiniyah, that allows him to inwardly guide the hearts of sincere believers, nurturing them and escorting them towards their spiritual destination. This is a metaphysical reality, a divine station rooted in God's absolute will, completely beyond the authority of earthly kings to confer or manipulate. Sayyedah Ma'suma was therefore a direct inheritor of this divinely sourced truth. She was a reflection of the purity spoken of by her ancestor, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, when he described the nature of their household. He said, Imam al-Sadiq rather said, "Indeed, God has purified our hearts and caused the springs of wisdom to flow within them, and he has made us the treasurers of his knowledge." Again, the references are all in the write-up. This was the environment that produced her, a house of purification, wisdom, and divine trust. Now let us look at her journey of loyalty, the hijrah towards her Imam. When Imam al-Ridha was forcibly taken from Medina to Khurasan in the year 200 AH, the Abbasid Khalif al-Ma'mun Abbasi intended to isolate the Imam from the base of his support. In 2001 AH, Sayyedah Ma'suma initiated a profound countermove. Her departure from Medina at the head of a caravan was not simply a journey of familial longing. It was a hijrah, a conscious and deliberate migration in loyalty to the Imam of her time. In Islamic thought, hijrah signifies a movement away from a state of compromise or danger towards one of faith and security. For Sayyedah Ma'suma, the security of the entire faith rested with the Imam. To be severed from him was the ultimate danger. To move towards him was the ultimate act of submission. Her journey was a physical manifestation of the principle articulated by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, peace and blessings be upon him, who said, "Indeed, it is Islam, and Islam is submission or taslim." By leaving, again, the reference is in the write-up, by leaving the city of her ancestors, Medina, She declared that the true homeland of a believer, and this is very important, the true homeland of a believer is not a piece of land, but proximity to the proof of God. Her action was a political statement against the legitimacy of the Abbasid regime and a spiritual statement on the centrality of the Imam. Now we look at sacrifice on the road and echoes of Karbala. The path of principled defiance inevitably intersects with the forces of tyranny. As her caravan approached the city of Saveh, it was ambushed by Abbasid agents. In the ensuing violence, several members of her family were martyred. Historical accounts state that the noble lady herself was poisoned, falling gravely ill. This attack transformed her journey of loyalty into a journey of sacrifice, creating a powerful parallel with the ordeal of her great-aunt Sayyid Zainab following the massacre of Karbala. Both noble ladies undertook perilous journeys as a testament to their loyalty to the Imam of their age. Both refused to be intimidated into silence. Sayyedah Ma'suma's journey was an active rejection of the Abbasid political order, a practical embodiment of the jurisprudential prohibition against collaborating with unjust powers. That principle, a pillar of Shia political fiqh or jurisprudence, remains unchanged. It is not merely a recommendation, but a foundational command rooted in the very text of the Quran and the traditions of Ahlul Bayt. The Quran issues a stark and unequivocal warning against even the slightest inclination towards oppressors. In Quran, in Surah Hud, the chapter of Prophet Hud, 11th chapter of the Quran, verse 113, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And do not incline towards those who do wrong, lest the fire should touch you, and you have not besides God any protectors, then you would not be helped." Now, the Arabic verb used over here, tarkanu, is incredibly precise. It does not mean to actively join or fight alongside them. It means to incline towards them, to lean on or lean towards, to feel a sense of security with, or to tacitly approve them or overtly approve them. This prohibition targets the very seed of complicity. The fire touches not only the active collaborator, but also the one whose heart inclines towards the oppressor, even if their tongue denies it. The Imams of the Ahlul Bayt built upon this Quranic foundation with uncompromising clarity. In a famous and searing tradition, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim, the father of Sayyedah Ma'suma, confronted one of his own companions, Safwan al-Jamal, and we discussed this when we spoke about Imam al-Kadhim. Safwan al-Jamal used to rent camels to the Abbasid Khalif, Harun al-Abbasi, Harun Rashid. Safwan tried to justify his actions, but the Imam dismantled his reasoning, concluding with a question that pierces the conscience. He said, "O Safwan, do you love for them to remain in power?" Meaning, do you love the Abbasids to remain in power until your payment comes back to you? Safwan replied, "Yes." The Imam said, "Whoever loves for them, for the oppressor, for the tyrant, in this case the Abbasids, to remain is one of them. And whoever is one of them will enter the fire." This defines the vast scope of forbidden cooperation. It is not limited to holding a sword in the tyrant's army. It includes actions, economic or social, that contribute to the stability and continuation of an oppressive system or regime. To wish for the tyrant's survival, even for a day, even for a minute, just to secure one's own income, is to become one of them. And this principle is the bedrock of the political ethics of the school of resistance. The martyred leader of Hezbollah, Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi, understood that proximity to power is a constant test of one's integrity. He drew his lesson directly from the life of Imam al-Ridha, stating, "Imam al-Ridha, peace and blessings be upon him, taught us how to be within the palaces without ever becoming of the palaces or the people of the palaces." The danger is assimilation, to adopt the logic, the priorities, and the silence of the oppressor. This is why silence in the face of systemic injustice is not neutrality. It is a form of inclination, a type of rukun. The Sheikh of the Martyrs of the Resistance, Sheikh Raghib Harb, may God rest his pure soul, whose blood sanctified the struggle in South Lebanon, famously declared his position with the words, "If you are unable to change the reality, then you must declare your stance on it. The stance is a weapon, and the handshake is a recognition of the enemy's legitimacy." Again, the references and citations for all of these are in the write-up. A stance, clear, unwavering, and public, is itself an act of war against injustice. Therefore, when we witness the industrial-scale slaughter and calculated starvation of the people of Gaza, silence is complicity. Token gestures such as abstract calls for peace that equate the victim with the executioner, or political maneuvers like recognizing the state of Palestine, while continuing to arm and fund a Zionist entity, they are in fact worse than silence. They are a facade designed to manage public opinion while allowing the genocide to continue unabated. They are the modern form of lending camels to Harun Abbasi. True opposition, true loyalty to the principles of the Imamah demands an active and unambiguous stance of resistance. As the martyred leader of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, may God rest his pure soul, has repeatedly clarified, the goal of the enemy is to make their crimes seem normal, to make their existence in the region a settled fact. He said this, "The most dangerous thing we face at this stage is the attempt by some to push towards becoming accustomed to the scenes of the killing and destruction, and to coexist with oppression as a de facto reality. This is the true death of the Ummah. Our duty is to keep this cause alive in the conscience and on the battlefield. This is why the juristic ruling articulated by our highest authorities on this matter is also so very absolute. It is not the opinion of one scholar, but an unbroken chain of consensus, a principle defended with remarkable unanimity across the great seminaries of our time. This principle finds its modern jurisprudential roots in the work of the teacher of the jurists, Ayatollah al-Ulama Sayyid Abul Qasim al-Khoi, who laid the foundation in his legal treatise, saying, "It is not permissible to aid the oppressors in their oppression, nor any form of cooperation with them that would cause one to be counted among their helpers, except in a case of necessity, known as darura, and only to the extent of that necessity." Building upon this bedrock, the great authorities in Najaf today speak with a single voice. Ayatollah Sistani affirms this with his words. He says, "It is not permissible to aid the oppressor in their oppression. Indeed, any form of cooperation with them is prohibited, except in a state of necessity, and then only to the extent that that necessity requires." And again, all of the references for each of these citations is in the write-up. I encourage everyone to review and indeed verify them. This consensus is echoed by the contemporaries of Sayyid Sistani. For example, Ayatollah Sheikh Ishaq al-Fayyad, he states the prohibition covers anything that strengthens the oppressor. He says, "It is not permissible to aid the oppressors in their oppression, nor in anything that contributes to their power and ability, except where there is a pressing necessity." And also, Ayatollah Bashir Najafi adds a crucial dimension, noting that cooperation is forbidden, even in neutral matters, if it harms the faith or the faithful. He says, "It is not permissible to aid the oppressors in their oppression against the oppressed, for as cooperating with them in matters other than oppression, if it is considered a weakening of the religion, a promotion of falsehood, or a weakening of the believers, then it is also not permissible." Moving from the seminary to the state, this principle is applied with equal force to the act of holding office within an unjust system. The late Ayatollah al-Uzma, Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Fadlallah, was very explicit. He said, "It is forbidden for a person to be a helper to the oppressor in his oppression, and this includes undertaking any action that assists him in practicing his oppression or in consolidating the pillars of his oppressive authority, such as being a soldier in his army or a minister in his regime, in his government. And Imam Khamenei, the Wali al-Faqih, frames it as a matter of universal principle, regardless of the victim's faith. Imam Khamenei says, in principle, it is forbidden to assume any position on behalf of oppressive governments. In this, there is no difference between a government that is oppressive towards Muslims or towards non-Muslims. This unwavering consensus is not born from political convenience. It is anchored in the very heart of the Quran and the traditions of Ahlul Bayt. The Quran issues a stark warning against even the slightest inclination towards oppressors. As we've quoted earlier on in Surah Hud, the chapter of Prophet Hud, 11th chapter of the Quran, verse 113, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and do not incline, do not tarkanu towards those who do wrong, lest the fire should touch you. And it was the father of Sayyedah Ma'suma, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim, who defined the vast scope of this forbidden cooperation, stating that whoever wishes for the tyrant's survival, even for a moment, simply to secure their own income, is one of them, and whoever is one of them will enter the fire. This is the principle that fuels the ethics of the resistance. It is why Sheikh Raghib Harb declared that in the face of injustice, the stance is a weapon and the handshake is recognition. It is why Sayyid Abbas al-Musawi taught that one must be within the palaces without ever becoming of the people of the palaces. And it is why Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah warned that the greatest danger is becoming accustomed to the scenes of killing and destruction and to coexist with oppression as a de facto reality. Sayyedah Ma'suma's journey was the antithesis of cooperation. It was an open challenge to the tyrant's attempt to sever the Ummah from its Imam, and a timeless lesson that in the face of oppression, the only legitimate stance is one of movement, voice, and if necessary, sacrifice. Her journey was the antithesis of cooperation. It was an open challenge to the tyrant's attempt to sever the Ummah from its Imam. Let's now have a look at a contemporary resonance, loyalty in our time. The Hijrah of Sayyedah Ma'suma serves as a definitive model for believers in the era of occultation. Loyalty to the Imam of our age, Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return, cannot be a passive, sentimental state. It must be an active, dynamic principle that compels us to move intellectually, spiritually, and politically towards the values he represents. Our hijrah today is the migration from the comfort of apathy to the struggle for justice. It is to abandon the territory of silence when the truth is being slaughtered. This is the duty that our contemporary scholars have identified as the core responsibility in an age of global tyranny. As Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, stated, as long as Taghut or tyranny exists on earth, it is the duty of the scholars to clarify the truths of religion and to expose the essence of domination. And again, references are all in the write-up. Her hijrah is our blueprint. Loyalty demands action, even when the path is fraught with risk. Let's now have a look at some calls to clarify the duty of hijrah today. So first, we must recognize that the journey of Sayyedah Ma'suma was not undertaken for personal reasons, but to make a public declaration of allegiance and to affirm the Imam's legitimacy against the state that sought to isolate him. Second, we must clarify that true loyalty to the Imamah demands movement. One cannot claim allegiance to the Wilayah while remaining stationary and silent in the face of injustice. Third, in our time, this hijrah requires us to raise our voices for the oppressed in Gaza, to stand in solidarity with the steadfast people of Yemen, and to refuse the comforts of silence that make us complicit in the crimes of empire. Finally, just as her caravan was attacked by the soldiers of the Abbasid Khalif today the caravans of aid to Palestine are blockaded. We can see this happening in front of us today. And the voices of truth are censored. Her sacrifice is a lesson that loyalty will be met with resistance, but it is a journey that must never be abandoned. Please give me a salawat. We move on to the next point, which is Qom as a divine trust.
اللهم
اللهم
صل على
صل على
محمد
محمد
وآل
وآل محمد
محمد.
وعجل.
So the journey of Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'suma, though tragically cut short, did not end at Save. Her final act was a conscious decision that would shape the destiny of Shiism for centuries to come. Weakened by poison and grief, she did not ask to be taken back to Medina, nor to a place of quiet retreat. She asked to be taken to Qom. It was a choice rooted in the knowledge that this city was a bastion of loyalty to her family. There, in the year 201 after Hijrah, among the faithful lovers of Ahl al-Bayt, her soul returned to her Lord. The resting place from burial to beacon. The burial of Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'suma in Qom was not the end of a story. Rather, it was the planting of a seed. Her physical presence transformed the very geography of the land, elevating a modest town into a sacred sanctuary. This is a distinct pattern in the history of Shiism. The physical remains of the awliya, the friends of God, are not relics of the past, but are living conduits of divine grace. Her burial consecrated Qom, just as Najaf was consecrated by the presence of Imam Ali, Karbala by Imam Hassan, and Mashhad by her own brother, Imam al-Ridha. This event was not a historical accident. It was the fulfillment of a divine plan, foretold decades earlier by her great-grandfather, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, peace and blessings be upon him. In a tradition of profound significance, he declared, "Surely God has a sanctuary, and it is Mecca. Indeed, the messenger of God has a sanctuary, and it is Medina. Indeed, the commander of the faithful has a sanctuary, and it is Kufa. And indeed, our sanctuary and the sanctuary of our children after us is Qom." And the reference for this, of course, is in the write-up. This prophecy, uttered long before her birth, confirms that her arrival in Qom was not driven by chance, but by divine ordination. She was guided there to establish a sanctuary for the followers of Ahl al-Bayt, a trust that would be unpacked over the coming centuries. Let's now look at Qom as a city of knowledge, seminary, and resistance. So following her burial, Qom became a magnetic pole for the lovers of Ahl al-Bayt. Scholars, narrators of hadith, and seekers of truth began to migrate to that city, seeking the spiritual blessings or barakat of her proximity. It was around her luminous shrine that the great Hawza, the seminary of Qom, began to coalesce. And this too was prophesied by Imam al-Sadiq, who foresaw the city's central role during the era of the Imam's occultation. He says, "A time will come when the city of Qom and its people will be a proof, a hujjah, over all of creation. Then knowledge will overflow from it to all other lands in the east and the west, and thus the proof of God will be complete over his creation." Her presence was the catalyst that activated this divine promise. This prophetic role is precisely what modern scholars have identified when analyzing Qom's history. The late Ayatollah Sayyid Muhammad Hussain Fadlallah, may God rest his pure soul, articulated this reality, explaining that Qom became the institutional manifestation of the duty of Imamah. He said, "Imamah is a responsibility, a divine duty, taklif. And Qom was and remains a center that carries this responsibility under the banner of the Ahl al-Bayt." Let's now look at shrines as seeds of civilization, a pattern. The transformation of Qom is not an isolated phenomenon. It is the quintessential model of Shia civilizational growth. Where a tyrant seeks to build an empire on power, the followers of Ahl al-Bayt build civilizations around an axis of love and knowledge. Najaf, Karbala, Mashhad, and Qom are not merely cities, they are institutions, each growing organically from the seed of a sacred shrine. These shrines are not tombs that signify an end, but wombs that give birth to entire schools of thought, libraries, and movements. To understand their enduring power, we must turn to a specific Quranic concept. And that is the concept of the remnant of God, baqiyat Allah. In Quran, the Prophet Shu'aib tells his people, and this is from Quran, Surah Hud, the chapter of Prophet Hud, 11th chapter of the Quran, verse 86. Prophet Shu'aib tells his people, the remnant of God is better for you if you are believers. Now, while in its immediate context, the verse refers to the lawful remainder of Prophet after honest dealing, the traditions of Ahlul Bayt explain its deeper universal meaning. The term Baqiyat Allah, or remnant of God, refers to any person, any reality or sign that God preserves on earth as a source of blessing and a divine proof for all of humanity. It is what remains of God's mercy amongst his creation. The prophets and their successors are the foremost examples of this. In our time, the primary and most complete manifestation of Baqiyatullah is the awaited Imam, Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom and may God hasten his return, as he is the final divine proof whom God preserves for the salvation of the world and indeed the universe. In his monumental exegesis, Tafsir al-Mizan, again, Allama Tabatabai discusses the traditions that expand on this concept. After analyzing the verse's literal meaning, he explores its esoteric dimension as identified by the Imams, showing how the term extends to the divine personalities themselves. He explains that anything good and lasting that comes from God can be considered his remnant. He says, and I quote, and again, the references are all in the write-up. So Allama says, and what is meant by Baqiyatullah is what God has left remaining for them of the lawful prophet after fulfilling the weight and measure. And it has been narrated in some of the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them, that the verse is applied to Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, or to the Imams as a whole, peace and blessings be upon them all. This is from the principle of flow and application, jari wa tatbiq. This is the application of a universal principle to its specific instances. For although the verse was revealed in the story of Shu'aib, as we mentioned, its meaning in generality includes the very good that God has left remaining for people. Therefore, the Imam is from the remnant of God, from the Baqiyatullah, and indeed, he is the best of it. Now, this insight is crucial, and I know we're getting into a number of technical points, but these are really important, so I ask for your patience in this. This insight is crucial. The Imams and their noble kin are the ultimate remnant or Baqiyatullah on earth, the ultimate remnants of God upon the earth. By extension, their sacred shrines are the physical manifestations of this divine remnant. They are the tangible signs of God's enduring presence and mercy, a living proof that tyrants and their empires are transient, while the light of God, preserved in his chosen ones, is permanent. If I can get a salawat, we can move to contemporary resonance, Qom as the heart of today's struggle.
اللهم صل
اللهم صل
على
على
محمد
محمد وآل محمد وعجل
محمد.
فرجهم.
So in the modern era, the trust of Qom yielded its most potent fruit. It was from the seminary built around her shrine that a movement arose which fulfilled a thus stunning prophecy, this one from her own father, Imam Musa ibn Ja'far al-Kadhim. He said, a man from the people of Qom will call the people to the truth. A group of people will gather with him, who are like pieces of iron. Upon God they place their trust, and the victorious outcome is for the God-conscious or the God-aware. With the rise of Imam Khomeini, may God rest his pure soul, a man from Qom, and the establishment of the Islamic Revolution supported by a people like pieces of iron, this tradition was vividly realized. The city became not just a center of academic learning, but the strategic base for the most significant resistance movement of our time. Imam Khamenei constantly reaffirms this unique role, saying, Qom is the base and the hope of the revolution, the base of Islamic and Wilayah thought. The spirit of Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'suma's own life, a fusion of knowledge and action, is embodied in the institution that grew around her. Let's now have a look at the calls to clarify, making our communities mini Qoms. So first, we must clarify that the shrines of Ahl Bayt are not backward relics. They are forward-looking, civilization-building centers of knowledge, identity, and resistance. Second, just as Qom was transformed from a humble town into a global hub for truth, because it accepted the trust of her burial, so too can our own homes and communities become beacons of light, if they are rooted firmly in the Wilayah of the Ahl Bayt. Third, this means we have a duty to create mini Qoms wherever we are. We must establish spaces in our centers, in our study circles, in our homes, in our online sessions that serve as sanctuaries for authentic knowledge, unwavering loyalty, and a principled stance against oppression. Finally, we carry the trust of Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'sooma by understanding and confronting the modern-day Savehs of our time. But what is a modern-day Saveh? We must be clear. Historically, Saveh was a physical location where the caravan of Sayyedah Ma'sooma, a caravan of loyalty moving towards the Imam, was brutally ambushed by the forces of tyranny. And in fact, today, the town of Saveh is just outside of, between Tehran and Qom. Today, the ambushes continue, though their forms have evolved. The modern-day Savehs are the strategic choke points where the forces of global arrogance attempt to halt the caravan of truth. They manifest in two primary ways. Firstly, the ideological Saveh. This is the ambush on the caravan of ideas. It is the relentless propaganda, the sophisticated media warfare, and the systemic censorship designed to intercept the truth, poison the narrative against the resistance, and assassinate the character of those who speak for the oppressed. And the physical Saveh. This is the direct, brutal parallel to the original attack. It is the genocide, criminal siege, and blockade imposed upon the people of Gaza, and indeed upon all of Palestine. It is the years of war and starvation inflicted upon the people of Yemen. The brutal maximum pressure and snapback sanctions against the people of Iran. And we must not forget the oppression against the people of the world as a whole by a small number of corrupt criminal elites. These are literal ambushes designed to slaughter entire populations who have dared to remain in the caravan of resistance. In the face of these modern attacks, our duty is to honor the legacy of Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'sooma. We do this by founding our own small sanctuaries of loyalty and light, our own mini Qoms, ensuring that the banner of truth she carried on her final journey is never, ever allowed to fall. Please give me a salawat and we'll move to the third point, which is her spiritual status, the noble lady of Ahl Bayt.
اللهم صل
اللهم
على
صل على
محمد
محمد وآل
وآل محمد.
So having explored her journey of loyalty and the divine trust of her final resting place, we now arrive at the heart of the matter, her personal spiritual station or maqam. Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'sooma was not an imam, nor the daughter of a prophet, yet the Shia tradition elevates her to a station of immense sanctity. This final point seeks to understand the source of that sanctity and its meaning for us today. She's known as Karimeh Ahl Bayt, the noble lady of the household. Among her many titles, the one that has become synonymous with her name is Karimeh Ahl Bayt, the noble and generous lady of the household of the Prophet. Now, this title is not merely a term of endearment, rather it is a theological statement. It is a recognition from the Imams themselves that her spiritual rank was a direct reflection of her nobility, of her lineage, and more importantly, the purity of her devotion. This is not a matter of conjecture. It is established by the words of her own brother, the eighth Imam, Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha, in a tradition that has become the cornerstone of her ziyarah. He declared, "Whoever visits al-Ma'sooma in Qom is like one who has visited me." In another narration, the Imam sets a profound condition for attaining paradise through her visitation, a condition that elevates her status immensely. He says, whoever visits her knowing her right, paradise shall be for him or her. And the references to both these hadiths and all of these are in the write-up. Again, I strongly recommend people review the write-up. The key here is ma'rifah, deep Gnostic insight into her right. What is this right? It is the right of her absolute purity, her profound knowledge, and her unwavering submission to the Imam of her time and to God. To know her right is to recognize that she was a perfect mirror, reflecting the light of Imamah. Therefore, the path to paradise through her is a path of ma'rifah of the Imamah she so perfectly embodied. And then there are the parallels with Sayyedah Zahra and Sayyedah Zainab. Her spiritual station can best be understood by placing her in the lineage of the great women of Ahlul Bayt, who each served as the guardian of Wilayah in their own eras. This is the golden chain of female guardianship that runs parallel to the chain of the Imams themselves. You have Sayyedah Fatimah al-Zahra, peace and blessings be upon her. She safeguarded the Imamah through her powerful public protest and sermons following the death of her father, establishing the foundation of a principled opposition to an illegitimate rule. You then have Sayyedah Zainab al-Kubra, peace and blessings be upon her. And she safeguarded the Imamah by protecting the life of Imam Sajjad and by turning the court of a tyrant into a platform for exposing the crime of Karbala. And then you have Sayyedah Fatimah al-Ma'suma, peace and blessings be upon her. And she safeguarded the Imamah through her hijrah, a public act of loyalty that broke the political isolation imposed on her brother and planted the seed for a sanctuary of knowledge that will protect Shiism and Islam for years and centuries to come. The vanished leader, Imam Musa al-Sadr, spoke of this sacred and continuous role. He said, when a Muslim woman is conscious of her mission, she becomes a guardian of the line of Imamah and martyrdom, just as Sayyedah Fatimah and Sayyedah Zainab were. Sayyedah Ma'suma is an integral link in this chain of guardianship, a testament to the central role of women in preserving the message of Ahlul Bayt. Let's now look at shrines of women as sanctuaries of Wilayah. Unlike almost any other religious tradition, the Shia school of thought elevates the shrines of holy women, such as those of Sayyidah Zainab, Sayyidah Ruqayyah, Sayyidah Ma'suma, to the level of major theological and pilgrimage centers. This is because our theology recognizes that spiritual perfection and proximity to God are not contingent on gender. The shrine of a saint is a physical focal point for a spiritual reality that transcends the body. The great philosopher Mullah Sadra, in his commentary on Usul al-Kafi, provides a framework for understanding this phenomenon. He explains that the sacred bodies of saints are not merely decaying matter, but are loci of divine energy. He says, indeed, the sacred bodies of the saints, or the awliya, and the chosen ones are the shadows of their lights and the sights through which their spiritual effusions reach the world. Therefore, the shrine of Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'suma is not merely her grave. It is the shadow or physical manifestation of her luminous spiritual reality, and it functions as a conduit for divine grace, blessings, and knowledge to flow into this world. This is why prayers are answered and hearts are transformed in her presence. Let's now look at a contemporary resonance, women as carriers of resistance. This model of female spiritual authority and guardianship finds its living expression in our own time. The steadfastness of Sayyedah Ma'suma is the archetype for the women who form the bedrock of the modern-day resistance. The mothers of the martyrs in Lebanon, the patient women of Yemen under siege, the revolutionary women of Iran, and most vividly today, the legendary women of Gaza who pull their children from the rubble and still raise their voices in defiance of tyranny. These are all her spiritual descendants. The martyred Secretary General of Hezbollah, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, has often testified to this reality from his position while on the front lines. He said, "How many women there are who have been firmer than men in moments of trial and in truthfulness with God." Sayyidah Ma'suma's life teaches us that firmness in faith is not a matter of physical strength, but of spiritual clarity and unwavering loyalty to the cause of God. Let's now look at our last call to clarify for this evening, honoring the noble women of our age. So first, we must clarify that Wilayah is carried not only by male scholars and warriors, but by women of profound devotion, insight, and sacrifice. The veneration of Sayyidah Ma'suma is proof that our tradition has always recognized this. Second, just as Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'suma transformed Qom into a sanctuary of knowledge, women today transform homes, communities, and even battlefields into sanctuaries of loyalty, raising a new generation on the principles of dignity and resistance. Finally, our duty is not to marginalize or silence these women, but to honor and amplify their central role in building the civilization of Wilayah. To prepare for the return of our Imam, we must recognize and empower the modern-day carriers of the spirit of Sayyid Zahra, Sayyid Zainab, and Sayyidah Ma'suma. If I can now get a loud salawat, we can move to the conclusion, which is the embodiment of Wilayah and the school of Ziyarah.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.
So we have journeyed in this session with the noble lady, the Karimeh of Ahl al-Bayt, from the city of the Prophet to the sanctuary of Qom. Across these 3 points, a single unifying truth emerges. The life of Sayyidah Fatimah Ma'suma was a complete and perfect manifestation of Wilayah, loyalty to the Imam in action, in legacy, and in essence. First, we witnessed her journey of loyalty, born into the very heart of Imamah. She undertook a courageous hijrah, a sacred migration, not just to her brother, but to the principle of divine leadership itself. Her journey was a public act of defiance against the tyrant's attempt to isolate the Imam, a sermon delivered not with words, but with footsteps, sacrifice, and blood. Second, we saw how her martyrdom was not an end, but the planting of a divine trust. Her burial fulfilled stunning prophecies that transformed the city of Qom from a humble town into a fortress of knowledge and a beacon of resistance. Her shrine became a baqiyatullah, a remnant of God, a living seed from which a civilization of scholarship and revolution would grow, proving that the light of the saints always outlives the fleeting power of tyrants. Finally, we reflected on her immense spiritual status. As Karimeh Ahl al-Bayt, she is a continuation of the sacred line of female guardianship we see in Sayyidah Fatimah al-Zahra and Sayyid Zainab al-Kubra. Her shrine is not a mere grave, but a conduit for divine effusion. And her life stands as the timeless archetype for the women of resistance who serve as the bedrock of our ummah today. Her life, then, is a complete school of loyalty. But this profound legacy invites us to engage with her on an even deeper level, not just as a historical figure to be admired, but as a living spiritual presence and a gateway to divine mercy. The key to that engagement, the path to understanding her station, has been given to us in the form of her sacred ziyarah, her visitation prayer. In our next session, God willing, we will unpack this beautiful and theologically rich text. The ziyarah of Sayyidah Fatimah Ma'suma is not a simple ritual. It is a school of divine knowledge and a covenant of active loyalty. We will explore its depth through 3 main points. First, we will focus on greeting and recognition. We will analyze the meaning of saluting her with ma'rifah, knowing her right, and understand why true recognition of her station is the absolute condition for a meaningful ziyarah and the key to paradise. Second, we will delve into the concept of intercession and wilayah. We will examine the explicit request in her ziyarah for shafa'ah or intercession and unpack the Quranic and theological basis for it, understanding it not as a challenge to God's authority, but as a bridge of mercy and a model for our own solidarity with the oppressed. And finally, we will conclude with the covenant of Qom. We will see how the ziyarah is sealed with a prayer to live and die on the path of Muhammad and his family, transforming the act of visitation from a momentary supplication into a lifelong commitment to the cause of Islam, of Ahlul Bayt, and ultimately the cause that will take us to Allah. In this way, we will see that to visit her is to learn from her. To learn from her is to make a covenant with her. And to make a covenant with her is to enlist in the caravan of loyalty that she continues to lead from her sanctuary in Qom. A caravan whose ink is the blood of Karbala, whose horizon is the promised victory of Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom, and whose ultimate purpose is the journey back to God. If I can get allowed salawat, we can now have the supplication eulogy, which for Sayyedah Fatimah Ma'suma tonight, which is titled The Covenant of Qom and the Awaited Dawn.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد عجل فرجهم.
In the name of God, the All-Merciful, the All-Compassionate. O God, send your boundless blessings upon Muhammad, the seal of the prophets, upon Ali, the commander of the faithful, upon Fatima, the lady of light, upon Hassan, the mirror of patience, upon Hussein, the artery of justice, and upon the Imams from his progeny, the lanterns of your guidance and the guardians of your mercy. And send peace upon Sayyedah Fatimah al-Ma'suma, the Karima of Ahlul Bayt, the noble lady whose generosity of spirit transformed Qom into a sanctuary of your remembrance, and whose covenant became a seed of civilization. O Lord, as we stand in her presence through ziyarah, make our lives the life of Muhammad and his family, and our deaths the death of Muhammad and his family, as her covenant teaches us to pray. O Lord, we echo the voice of Ziyad Ashura. I am at peace with those at peace with you, and at war with those at war with you. Therefore, just as she is an intercessor before you, make us intercessors for the oppressed in this world. Voices that speak when tyrants command silence, hands that feed the hungry in your name, shields that shelter the innocent under the bombs in Gaza, and hearts that never abandon Al-Quds. O Lord, just as she made her hijrah towards her Imam, guide our hearts on a constant hijrah towards yours. Hasten the return of your Wali, the son of Sayyedah Fatimah, our master, Imam al-Mahdi, may our souls be his ransom. Count us amongst his loyal companions, firm in trial, truthful in speech, unshaken in loyalty. O Lord, protect our Wali al-Faqih, preserve the righteous Maraja, and strengthen the believers who clarify your truth in every land. O Lord, grant relief to the oppressed, to the children under rubble, to the mothers in grief, to the prisoners in chains, to the refugees in exile. Make our ziyarah of Sayyedah Ma'suma a covenant to never abandon them. O Lord, let our answer to the call of Ziyarat Ali Yasin. Peace be upon you, O remnant of God on his earth. Be a life lived in preparation, so that we may earn the honor of praying behind him, with Jesus, the Spirit of God, by his side. In a world where shrines are not threatened but celebrated, where Qom's covenant has spread to every city, and where every believer lives as a witness of Wilayah. Amen, O Lord, sustainer of the universes. Amen, O most merciful of the merciful. Wa akhiru da'wani an alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.